we're lucky that I think 84,000 project translating the words of Buddha made this translation possible, because otherwise it's a very daunting task. As you'll notice that it's a massive text with literally more than 2,000 pages in Tibetan alone, the folios, and without support from the 84,000 project, I think it would be very difficult for an individual to undertake this translation. And the person who did it, Dr. Thomas Doctor, I had an opportunity or privilege to work with him on a certain other project, and I think he has done a wonderful job. Beautiful translation, but I don't think we would. Certainly, I wouldn't be able to, in a million years, to be able to produce this kind of beautiful translation. Very fluid, very accessible, because most of the time translation the language tend to be very dry and abstract, but he brings some sort of liveliness into the work. So I think that's why. Okay, so this word, application of mindfulness of the sacred Dharma. Sanskrit word is Sat Dharma Smriti Upasthana. Sat, yes, it can be translated as sacred, but it can also be translated as truth, true. So if I were to translate, I might choose perhaps true Dharma, because Dharma does not necessarily have to be always truth. Dharma can be false Dharma too. But here, Tambeche can, I think, but sacred also gives you the idea that this is not just ordinary Dharma that we are talking about. It basically, when Buddha gave this discourse, you will notice that he gave this discourse in the light of a particular question that is being raised. So, and when he did it, basically it just literally lay out the experiential framework of an advanced meditator, and probably in this case, his own experience, the process he went through. Okay, so when you look at the content of this, you might not, you might be not too keen, because when you look at it, it's almost like hells and heavens. That looks like the major content, and there's nothing sort of, and they accept some other mental process that is being named. I think the sūtra itself, the content doesn't look very appealing and attractive, but essentially this sūtra is about the four foundation of mindfulness, or four application of mindfulness. So, and you'll notice that there is only one explicit name, the application of mindfulness of body, at the last chapter, except you will notice all the hells and heavens and other bits. But you will notice that actually, of course, that is not a true reflection of what is happening in the text itself. The text itself is a very, very rich account of somebody's whole journey. And one thing you will notice that is, when generally Buddhist talks about those heavens and hells, you don't need to project them as some sort of existential spheres that sits outside your own mind. But basically the idea here is, when Buddha explains it, he explains from the perspective, from the experiential standpoint of one particular advanced meditator who has gone through or understand everything within the framework of his own direct experience. So in this very life, when you're meditating, these experience can be brought into direct access. Okay, so in Tibetan, you will notice noble application mindfulness of sacred Dharma. So this word application, upasthana, this is a Sanskrit word. Smriti upasthana. In Sanskrit translation, I will make reference to that as well, because in Sanskrit, so in Pali we have two smaller suttas. It is called Satipatthana Sutta, and word sati is being used in Pali. In Sanskrit, we tend to use the word smriti. But for the meditator, mostly it's this word smriti. Sometimes we translate as mindfulness. Sometimes in the context of a meditation, especially the Vipassana meditation, awareness is a better translation, because it is the awareness. In fact, you have a very little to do with the memory. Well, memory has a function to bring. Whenever you lose this object of meditation, you need to bring it back. So you have to remember your object of meditation. If it is breath, you have to bring it back again and again. But the most important function of that meditation is actually to be aware of the object at a particular moment. So if you're breathing, if your object of meditation is breath, then this awareness of the breath, awareness of incoming, outgoing, natural normal breathing, the nature, or the what we call the reality pertaining to the breath, and that's why sati as an awareness is a much better, much better alternative when you're actually using it in the context of actual application. But that said, word smriti in the Indian context usually refers to memory. So it is this word smriti and sati translate either as mindfulness in terms of memory, recollection, or awareness as an observation. So your job essentially as a meditator is to be able to observe everything within the framework of your body. And that's the particular, you could say, unique feature of the meditation you will notice here. Buddha is going to introduce. So hopefully you have this sati and smriti distinction, or maybe that's not entirely accurate. Sati is a Pali word, smriti is a Sanskrit word, but both can have memory as its meaning or awareness as meaning. So you could say it has a nuanced meaning, but when you're actually sitting and applying, then of course awareness is much better, because after all, when you try to be mindful of the breath, well, what do we mean by mindful? Are we talking about the remembering the breath? Maybe there is this understanding, remembering the breath, but actually direct awareness of the touch of the breath, awareness of incoming, outgoing breath. That awareness is a central function of the meditation in this case. Okay, so in the Tibetan, why this sutra is long? Because in Tibetan, Kanjur, this is a collection. Remember, Tibetans have done a massive job of translating, almost like, we couldn't say it's entire Buddhist teaching, because many got lost and burned and destroyed in the process. But they did a wonderful job literally from late 8th century until 9th, 12th, 10th century. Around that period, the Tibetan emperors literally host a translation bureau and established bureau, and they translated almost all available Buddhist teachings. So there were two major collections. One we call Kanju, the other one called Tenjur. Kanju collections are supposedly the actual words of Buddha, right? They are, and then Tenjurs are the translations or the interpreted works by the Indian scholars on Buddha's teaching, and they're called Tenjur. Now, this particular sutra, of course, because Tibetans attribute this to the Buddha himself. So this actually sits in Kanju collection, and it has 3 volumes. So volume 68, volume 69, 70, and 71. 4 volumes. So that's why you can see it's a massive text. So we don't expect to finish this but because there are a lot of sections, some sections that we can skip later on, but the section that we find particular interest, we will pay attention. So so that's the idea, and you'll notice that some of them, even each volume will literally have 300 average pages, and so there are 4 volumes. So that's why, yeah, so it's a massive project, and I think they have done even that sort of courage to begin this project. it's an enormous sort of deserves enormous appreciation and gratitude. Okay, so what else do I need to? So before if you look at this, let's say just a table of content. Yep. Unfortunately, there's literally no mention of 3 other mindfulness. Mindfulness body you will find at the end, and there is literally mostly a whole lot about hells and heavens. We will, of course, hopefully we will be able to talk about this at least 10 non-virtuous actions today. Hopefully we'll get there. But if you look at this, yes, the hells, and then of course lots of heavens, different types of heavens. Don't give up entirely onto them at the moment, okay? And you will find actually they are interesting read, and there are some of them are, and you don't, as I said earlier, you don't have to project it as if it's some sort of hells and heaven to be another realm that exists somewhere outside. Actually, these are tangible experience one meditator can experience and go through within his or her own life. Okay, depending on what type of karma that you have accumulated in the past, and what type of karma that you need to purify in order to become completely awakened. So here you can see some other interesting ones. Let's say maybe this might be a little bit more interesting, maybe more attractive. 11 great Dharma teachings, then 12 wholesome factors, 13 qualities for listening Dharma, and there should be one way that it is final section on the mindfulness of body. I can't find it. It's somewhere here. It doesn't matter. I think usually it's actually it's the last section, so it will take us plenty of time to get there. Anyway, okay. So before I refer to the Pali Sutta, Satipatthana Sutta, just look at these the setting. The summary, basically what happens here is this sutta is set in Rajgira. Rajgira, if you have been to India and if you have been to some Buddhist holy places, Rajgira is where Buddha turned, according to Mahayana tradition, but Buddha turned the third or the second wheel of Dharma, gave the teaching of Dhamma Sutra, all the perfection of Sutra supposed to be, at least part of it was given, particularly the Heart Sutra was given at the Rajgira. So this means around that period when Buddha gave this teaching, he was actually he was in Rajgira. And what happened, and as we will notice, is a group of let's say newly ordained monks who don't know much about Buddha's teaching had an encounter with a group of non-Buddhist monks, and they have interesting discussions. But then those non-Buddhist monks basically said that you look, the teachings of your teacher, Shriman Gautama, and our teacher, or our teachings are basically the same, because they essentially all the teachings are moral teachings. Abstention from all the immoral activities, abstention from immoral physical activities, immoral vocal activities, immoral mental activities, and we abstain from that, and we also abstain from encouraging others to do it. And the question was, does your teacher emphasize the same thing? And then the monks kind of agreed, yes, they do. But then they said, well, in that case, then what's the difference? There is no difference between our teaching and the teachings that your teacher gave, except your teacher, Shriman Gautama, claims that he is fully enlightened, omniscient person. So what makes him omniscient person? Although the teachings that he gave is no different from our teaching. So those newly ordained monks, I suppose, did not know how to answer it. And they waited for Shariputra. Apparently, these were the disciples of Shariputra, and Shariputra happened to be absent. And so then later on, when they come in contact with their own teacher, Shariputra, and Shariputra recommended those monks to actually take that question to the Buddha himself. So that's basically, and then in response to Buddha, Buddha gave the whole sutra as a reply to indicate, to demonstrate why there are some distinctive elements. So that's in brief. That's why the sutra came to existence. Okay, just for a let's say for the information's sake, you will notice that the main person who translated is Thomas Doctor, and he has done other wonderful translation, produced other wonderful translation as well. I think he is the main person responsible for this. So we are really thankful for his wonderful job he has done. So we pay tribute to his work. And now, in terms of just a quick introduction, I think that's what I said here. Mostly translation, the introduction deals with those newly ordained monks coming in contact with the non-Buddhist monks, and then ultimately asking those claiming that your teaching, Buddha's teaching and our teachings are basically literally identical. But then why is it that Shramana or Buddha claimed that he is an omniscient person? So in response to this, Buddha takes, give whole of the sutra as a in order to show that yes, his teaching is not just purely moral teaching, but yes, moral teaching, ethical teaching is just the foundation of something that needs to be higher. Namely, with the moral as a foundation, moral teaching as a foundation, you need to go above, because ultimately morality or ethical teaching, practice of ethics and morality is going to make a certain difference, because at least it's going to give you the life of the gods. You will be able to enjoy the let's say the luxury and the bliss of being born in the God realms. But before you, other than that, you cannot go any further. Which means there are two more dharmas needs to cultivate. One is samadhi, and then panya. Samadhi is a single-pointed concentration. Develop the faculty to the most developed extent, and then on top of it, of course, one can cultivate deep insight, analytic meditation. So therefore, that's where the difference is. Buddha's contribution is not just moral teachings, but Buddha's contribution, actually distinctive contribution, is about the art of cultivating single-pointed meditation. Not remember that also practice some of it already in India, because deep samadhi meditation. Remember Buddha, when we read Buddha's biography last year in the display of full display or something, the sutra already, and you will notice that Buddha studied those deep samadhis, absorptions from his Hindu teachers. Mostly they are Sankhya teachers. So even the samadhi cultivation, concentration cultivation, mindfulness cultivation was already there as a part of Hindu teaching. But then what Buddha did was his contribution came with the real panya or prakya that actually developed a systematic understanding of how things are within the framework of a body. So that's why I think in order to understand Buddha's contribution, we need to go further than the moral teachings and the let's say psychological teaching, but in terms of bringing that wisdom bear onto one's practice. Okay, so that's why I think hopefully by the time we go through the sutta, that we will get that impression. Okay, so the introduction goes, basically takes us into how the sutra came into existence, and then of course Buddha response. And here it is also said here that okay, as Buddha responds, he describes the path to the perspective of an adept meditating monk who applies the Dharma teaching correctly and so discovers the truth of Dharma and truth of Dharma within himself. So in a sense, think about this. How is it that one can go deep into one's own experience and explore everything that is being described in the text, including all the hell realms or God's realms? So that means we are not going outside into the world, but actually we take deep within one's own experience, understand and develop this perspective. So here it's said the generic and unnamed monk, from whose perspective the Buddha explains the subject matter, witness the myriad realms of existence from the hell of an ultimate torment to heaven free from strife. To, an enormous description. It's a very elaborate description. And one thing that you will notice is basically much of the discourse is about the, it's a relationship of cause and effect, because entire discourse is about essentially karma in a certain sense. Because negative karma brings us down, positive karma brings us up into the God's realm. But if you don't have any skill or any method that takes you or transcend those karma, then we get trapped into samsara. So Buddha introduces that third principle. And that's why, of course, nirvana or liberation, enlightenment becomes important. So you'll notice that, of course, even the translators have said that, yes, about 2,158 Tibetan pages. So it's going to be a long sutra to study. And here also, the interesting part is, okay, so remember this text, this sutra is certainly located in Tibetan Tenyu collection. But interesting thing is they actually classified as a Hinayana, some of them actually classified as Hinayana text, namely text belonging to lower or a smaller vehicle. Some actually said that some have classified, there seems to be certain controversy whether this sutra is a Mahayana or Mahayana text, or it should be classified as a Hinayana text. So there is a certain disagreement if you read in detail. But so I think some disagreement here. My own take is because Mahayana and Theravada or Mahayana Hinayana is mostly a distinction that is based on ethical ideals, ultimate motivation. So ethical ideals of bodhisattvahood and ethical ideals of arahanthood. Now this is because this teaching is mostly about, let's say, about meditation. Just whether you are Mahayanist or if you consider as a Theravadan, one has to go through the whole process. And one thing that you will notice that this sutra introduces that Theravada or Satipatthana Sutta does not do is the one final bit, namely focus on emptiness. There is an enormous focus on emptiness, and usually that's the Mahayana project. Remember, Theravadins or Hinayans usually emphasize on impermanence, suffering, and anatta, non-self, but they do not emphasize on emptiness. Whereas in this sutra, there is an enormous emphasis on emptiness as well. So my take is, yes, we can take that as yes, it includes all the teachings in smaller vehicle tradition, but also it takes a little bit further than that. So it could be actually it's a text that we can classify as a Mahayana origin. Okay, and then there are, of course, quite a lot of work being done. I suppose because we are studying this as a to aid our experience, to aid our own practice. Perhaps this might not necessarily, I think, important for you or for you at least. Okay. So that being said, there is another list again, the same list. Okay, so that takes us here into the prologue, and that is this basically Sutta itself has given an interesting, or at least a brief prelude of the sutra, and the prelude include essentially the setting where the sutra was set, almost like you got a play where it's unfolded. It's unfolded in the place, the village called Natali near Rajgira, and that's where, of course, the whole event took place. As you notice here, as a non-Buddhist asks, you Shakya followers, does your mendicant Gautama teach the mysteries of body are unattractive, ugly, unpleasant, and they want you to refrain from rejoicing them, even when they are done by another? We also do the same thing, he says. Does your mendicant Gautama teach that mysteries of speech are unattractive, ugly, and unpleasant, that one should refrain from rejoicing in them, even when done by another? We also consider mysteries of speech to be unattractive, and so forth. And then again, mysteries of the mind. So you got, remember this, the question is put basically body, mind, and speech. These are what in the classical Buddhist text called three doors of action. We can perform those actions only from those three doors. Either action has to be physical, vocal, or mental. So the question being put is, we do not condone or endorse any misdeeds, physical, vocal, and mental. And do you also endorse or refrain from doing the same thing? And then question, of course, it says, okay, what difference is there? So then, of course, we also do, what difference is there between your mendicant Gautama's Dharma Vinaya and our own? This is the most important question, right? Dharma Vinaya, Dharma basically translate here as a sacred. Vinaya means moral. You could say one moral teaching. Vinaya actually is an ethical code of conduct for monks and nuns, but also ethical code of conduct for all the Buddhist lay people as well as monastics. That moral principles that literally shape and guide our life. But when you have to bring this back into the fold of Buddha's teachings, how would you? So therefore, sometimes Vinaya, if you just say moral teaching, that's not enough. If you just say Dharma, they may not enough. So it's important to bring Dharma and Vinaya as a together. And that gives a sort of bigger, let's say, a more comprehensive description of Buddha's teaching. Dharma has 10 different meanings, but it can sometimes mean text, can mean teachings, it can sometimes mean performing good actions or abstaining from bad actions. But in this case, morally, of course, it involves samadhi, and it includes samadhi, namely concentration skills, mindful skills, but also mostly it includes the Buddha's insight, or what you call prajna, and the understanding or emptiness. Okay, and then this is, what are the ideas? What are the distinctive points? what makes the Dharma Vinaya of your mendicant superior to ours? This is a legitimate question, right? So if you were asked, if you're Buddhist and some comes to you and say, okay, and then this important question, because they would say the mendicant Gautama claims that he is omniscient, but upon us, when we look at these things, as his teaching and our teaching, essentially, is not much different. So what gives a legitimate reason for the Buddha to claim that he is awakened? This is an important question. You could say it's an important question that one needs to answer, and it looks like a not straightforward answer. So therefore, 2,000 literal odd, pages of answer here are detailing everything from. But more important thing from my point of view is actually applying the mindfulness, applying awareness, the 4 application of mindfulness. How do you actually put those mindfulness or awareness and apply in daily life and then transform? So that's the fundamental part. Okay. And so what happens, again, just a quick recap. Those non-Buddhist monks, when they ask this challenge, it's literally a challenge to the newly Buddhist monks. So they don't know, they don't have enough knowledge how to respond to this. But their teacher, Shariputra, was absent, so they couldn't answer. And Shariputra was absent, so Shariputra wasn't there to also answer it. And then when they took that question to Shariputra basically gave some literally like introduction of who Buddha was. And so the Venerable Ones, the eyes of the Blessed One, perceive everything directly. He understands actions, their effects, their ripening. And he says, basically, it is best that you take those questions to the Buddha himself, because he knows directly. And that's why. And not only that, not only he knows directly things, he actually has the ability to observe beings of the other realms. So here, of course, Shariputra gives this description, and then a large group of monks then set off, and basically this word blessed one basically is Tathagata. Tathagata and basically means thus gone, beyond, like, but I think is the convention usually is to translate this as the blessed one. It's not one of my favorite translation. I would have never translated the blessed one. I tend to see that if there's a blessed one, there is somebody who does the blessing. It's perfectly fine in Christian connotation, because you're then blessed by God, or you go to some other person who actually do the blessing. But when you use this word blessed one to the Buddha, maybe I'm in a wrong place, or maybe giving wrong interpretation. But I feel that's maybe not necessarily the most naturalistic sort of natural description. Okay. So this is what Shariputra says. Not only that Buddha has those qualities, but he says, with his mind permeated with a great compassion, he was the universal friend of all beings. This is important. So he does not see like this is a Buddhist group, something who that I need to care about. These are non-Buddhist group, I don't care about them. That's because that's a prejudice. That's a just like our way of doing things. We as ordinary people, we tend to think that everything that we belong and close to us are more important. So we approach the world in a very biased, prejudiced way. And there's an enormous literature about what they call implicit bias, the deep biases that is I think that is a subject of a lot of study nowadays. And it's great that actually this is coming out, because before that, until recently, that is totally taken for granted. It's basically understood as something that is natural, human beings. And now what Buddha, of course, Buddha's teaching, what this Buddha's teaching is all about. Buddha's teaching is about how to literally transform that implicit bias. So that's why if the implicit bias actually, the home of those implicit biases, our own attachment to our own self. Until and unless we resolve this deep issue of self-attachment, self-clinging, there is no way to address this implicit bias. Because the bias most, and there's another reason why Buddha addressed this. Buddhists addressed this. Our biases are actually most prominent within the framework of the body. If you go to your body, you will realize that any experience you have, unpleasant experience, you always want them. Unexperienced that arises on the body, you always dislike them, you hate them, you repel them. So this attraction, repulsion, and the confusion arises within the framework of the body. And that is the most, let's say, expressive implicit bias that is on display. Every individual will have that. That means the hate we have with the unpleasant experience, attraction that we have on the pleasant experience, and then if there's a neutral experience, you just we ignore them, and that is the deepest rooted implicit bias. The whole Buddha's teaching, from my understanding, is actually to come out from the implicit bias. And in order to do that, of course, a rigorous meditative experience of total dissolution, namely emptiness, non-self, those things needs to be undertaken seriously, rigorously, because once you basically deconstruct yourself totally with no solidity whatsoever, then you will see that your own existence is just like the existence of any other being. There is no privilege, no identity that is privileged, that has some sort of privileged existence. So, and that's why you will notice that that's important. That becomes the central contribution of Buddha's teaching that has the ability to, let's say, free ourselves from the trappings of the implicit bias, namely a clinging to self. Technical term the Buddha used is tanha, or craving or addiction to deep-rooted psychological, physical sensations. So in other words, the test of whether we are immune to, whether we suffer these biases and prejudices, is your body or your mental experience. So if you have unpleasant mental experience, do you have hate, or do you really really wants to escape from it? Or do you make the distinctions that happiness is something that you want, or a pleasant experience is something that you want, unpleasant experiences that you really detest, you just want to run away? That is implicit bias. So when that deep-rooted bias becomes operational and becomes visible, then of course we use the same scheme to differentiate who we want to associate. Anyway, so that's why I think it is fundamentally important. We have to literally, in order to understand this sutra, we need to fall back to our experience, come back to the body experience, and I'll come back to that when we refer to the Satipatthana Sutta, why experience is so fundamental here. Okay, so then Shariputra says basically he taught the two truths, my favorite subject, comprehend the twofold suffering, accomplish and actualize cultivation, realize the results of the path, gain the knowledge of the reality of cessation, endowed with eyes that perceive the three realms directly. He revealed the three realms to others. He had fathomed the real nature of 18 elements. Those 18 elements are basically, think about this, you got 6 senses and the 6 cross-moving objects. And then when those 6 cross-moving objects and 6 senses comes to contact together, they give rise to 6 corresponding consciousness. So that makes 18, right? what science, of course, modern science don't accept is they accept the 5 senses. They don't accept 6 senses. The 6th sense is what we call mental sense. The mental sense and thoughts. When mind and thoughts comes together, it produces what called mental consciousness. So the Buddhist takes those 18. They are called 18 domains of engagement. These are important. So once you basically explore all of those within yourself, basically you are liberated, at least in this sense. So anyway, and not reading all these things, basically because Buddha has these qualities, and then they said she should take this question to the Buddha himself. Here is another one, last, and I think he's fearless with the 4 types of fearlessness, endowed with the great compassion and constant in the possession of threefold applications of mindfulness. Right. So this application of mindfulness is the thrust of this sutra. And as a result, what they does when the Buddha they take this question to the Buddha, and then Buddha said, blessed one, replied the monks, we shall just, okay, 1 minute. When the monk had finished this account, blessed one spoke the following words to the monks, as well as the Brahmins of Natali and the others. Monks, I shall explain for you a teaching of Dharma that is known as mindfulness of Sacred Dharma. Sat Dharma Pundurika, Sat Dharma Smriti Upasthana Sutra. Auspicious in the beginning, auspicious in the middle, and the auspicious at the end. Sometimes auspicious, but also the another way of understanding more concretely is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. Because when you say auspicious, almost like abstract, but whereas when you say good in the beginning, when you practice Dharma, when you applies those 4 foundations of mindfulness, then actually that application brings good in the beginning, brings good in the middle, brings good in the end. So that's the idea. It's not an abstract quality. This teaching is of the profound meaning and conveyed in the excellent words, unique, complete, pure. It explains the perfect training and pure conduct. Listen keenly. Keep in mind what I say. I shall explain it for you. So then, of course, that's why the sutra came into existence. And the monks said, yes, as you advised, we will keep in mind. So this is a prologue to the sutra. Okay, how are we doing with time? Ooh. Okay, so we got only half an hour. Any questions so far? We didn't get to the... I will stop sharing a little bit. Any questions? Yes, Kamla. You're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Right. So this text is the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, isn't it?
Yes, it's called not Mahasatipatthana Sutta. This is actually Smriti Upasthana Sutta. This is the sutta and the version of sutta that existed in the Tibetan tradition, but it is different from Satipatthana Sutta, Mahasatipatthana Sutta, which I will share you. Okay. Do you have further question? Do you have further question?
No, that's all.
Okay. So any other question? Quick question?
Yes. Just it's the 4 applications of mindfulness.
Yep.
But you only talk of 3, body, speech, and mind. What's the 4th?
Okay. So basic 4 application of mindfulness. Body, speech, and mind. They are 3 doors of action. Okay. Body, speech, mind.
Okay.
3 doors of action. But 4 foundational mindfulness, they are mindfulness of body, mindfulness of bodily sensation. That's 2. 3rd, mindfulness of mind. 4th, mindfulness of mental content. So these are the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And in order to make it explicit, let me share you this. And that, I think, hopefully will make it.
Do you mind if I request you can put your video on so we can see you?
Oh, sorry. Have I?
Thank you.
Sorry, didn't know it. Actually gone off. Okay, let me there. Okay, so let me share the screen once again. And this is the version that exists in Theravada tradition. Okay, and this is actually the manual for Vipassana meditators. Those who have done Satipatthana course, this is the sutta that we have studied. Can you see sutta now?
He just needs full screen, Sonam, please.
Okay. Yep, sure. 1 minute. For this strange thing, it doesn't allow me to do the full screen. That's what. View. It's weird. Doesn't give me full screen option in this strange. Okay, so maybe. What can you see the text well?
Yeah, I think also, people might have the opportunity to, to make the screen bigger as well themselves by the percentages a little.
Yeah, unfortunately, because I'm using Zotero here and it doesn't
It's okay.
allow me to do that. I can maybe okay, increase the size a little bit if that helps.
Sonam, I've been able to make full screen myself on my own screen, so I think maybe
Okay,
everyone has that opportunity also, so it's okay.
thank you. Unfortunately, I can't from this and strange for some reason. Maybe my incompetency. Okay, so here this is what is called in Pali tradition. This is called Mahasatipatthana Sutta. Okay, the great discourse on the establishing of awareness. Now, strangely, so the Tibetan version or the Sanskrit version of Sacred Dharma, Smriti Upasthana, right? Smriti, instead of Sati, it's called Smriti, and instead of Patthana, it has Upasthana, but essentially it's only difference is the words. So I see this actually, the version that we have in the Tibetan, more or less like a commentary on this. Commentary on Mahasatipatthana Sutta that exists in Pali. So those of you who have done Satipatthana course 8-day sitting would have already read this, studied this text very closely. So let me take you, so if you look at this content, you can see Kaya Anupasthana, basically observation of the body. That's the first mindfulness, foundation mindfulness. Second, Vedana Anupassana, the observation of sensation. This word Vedana in Pali and as well as Sanskrit, Vedana is basically experience. And because experience can be both mental and physical, but here actually Vedana is translated as observation of sensation, which actually which is located on one's body. And then a third one is Chitta Anupassana, is the observation of mind. Dhamma Anupassana is the observation of mental content. Now, the observation of mind and observation of mental content, they are very closely connected. Just as observation of body and observation of sensation, they are closely connected. Because you cannot observe the body unless you actually experience your body, unless you feel certain sensations that arises from the body. In the same way, you cannot observe the mind. How can you observe mind? Unless you know something arises in the mind. So if there's anger arising in the mind, you know what you observe the mind. Joy arises in the mind, you observe the mind. Although they, each of them have their own separate way of cultivating practice, but usually they, when you observe, cultivate awareness observing the body, you have to experience the body. In the same way, in order to observe awareness of your mind, one has to experience at least what's happening at least in the, in a level of the brain. Some brain activities, whether it's, if you have a very hot scalp, or if there's so much of heat, so much of cold, that actually, those bodily sensations help us to observe, or allow us a vehicle, or to provide the vehicle for us to observe this breath. So these are the four, some texts will say 4 foundations of mindfulness, but I think 4 foundations of mindfulness again makes it a little abstract. But what do we mean by foundation of mindfulness? There's a foundation and there's something mindfulness, and it becomes like this. Essentially, sati and patana means establishing, just as it is translated, establishing the mindfulness of body, establishing the mindfulness of sensation, establishing the mindfulness of mind, establishing the mindfulness of mental content. Now, mental content, Sanskrit word or Pali word is dhamma. Sanskrit word would be dharma, right? Dharma is anything that arises into your mind. So it could be anger, hatred, lust, delusion, animosity, fear, joy, everything that includes dharma in this case. Now, so let me go back here and basically read you two very important passages, I think. So this one, interestingly, this sutra is set in Kuru. Kuru is a place nowadays is located in somewhere in between Punjab and Delhi, called Karnal. There's a Karnal and there's a Vipassana center. I was able to do a 10-day retreat there. And Kuru is also a place where Mahabharata, India's great epics, also is set. So Kuru is, I think, in ancient time, is a very special occasion. So basically, according to this sutra, Buddha taught Mahasatipatthana Sutra in this place, Kuru. Okay, so it is said at one time, enlightened one was staying among the Kurus of Kammasadham Dhamma, a market town of Kuru people. People somewhere in the Karnal. If you go from Delhi towards Dharamsala, you will come across this place, Karnal. Now, this is interesting. And then he says, this is the one and the only one way. Pali word is ekayano ayam bhikkhu maggo sattanam vishuddhaya, which means ekayano maggo. Only one. There is one and the only one way. You might think, okay, what by one and only one way? And those one and one way basically consist of the fourfold establishment of awareness. And he said, this is the one and the only way amongst for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the extinguishing of suffering and grief, for walking on the path of truth, for the realization of Nibbana. I think this is a very comprehensive, very nicely comprised. And then he says, that is to say the fourfold establishing awareness. In other words, from Buddha's standpoint, fourfold establishing awareness are the only way one can use for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow. I think there we can, of course, spend a bit of more time to unpack what it meant here. But the point is, one has to use any one of those fourfold establishing awareness, or all of them, in order to become fully perfect, or realize Nibbana. And in order to do that, one has to walk the truth. And that is the path. These fourfold awareness, establishing awareness, actually the means. Kamala, yes. You have a question?
It somehow correlates to the Four Noble Truths. Am I right?
Which one?
The four ways, the purification of beings.
Oh, no. The four ways, basically, the four ways we have already talked about: observing the body in body, observing sensation in sensation, observing mind in mind, and observing mental content and mental contents. Those four, they are not talking about four noble truths. Four noble truths is included in that, but there's basically fourfold establishing of awareness. Basically, include the four foundations of four types of mindfulness we talked about: the mindfulness of body, mindfulness of sensation, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of mental contents. Those fourfold. So the claim, the point is that these fourfold establishing of awareness, Buddha says, are the only way we can use for our purification, for the overcoming of sorrow, for the overcoming of lamentation, for the extinguishing of suffering, and for the attainment of the realization of Nibbana, and for the realization of Bodhi, if you like, final awakening. Yes. So those fourfold, they are not four noble truths, but these fourfold awarenesses, establishing awareness, are fourfold foundation of mindfulness that we talked about. Now, then this sūtra is good because actually it sort of make it compact, whereas Smriti Upasthana Sutta, the Tibetan one, is because it's so elaborate. There is sometimes very concise, compact sentences could be difficult to find. So let me quickly read this. Which four, he says, the monks among dwells ardent with awareness and constant thorough understanding of impermanence. This is a mouthful translation, but Sanskrit Pali word is basically sambhajano satima. Sambhajano, basically, sambhajano is the Pali word. Sambhajanam is a Sanskrit, which means sometimes people translate as Tibetan. In Tibetan, we called Henshi. Some people translate as metta awareness. I'm not sure about metta awareness, but Pali, I think Vipassana Research Institutes translate as a thorough understanding of impermanence. And basically, because if you just say metta awareness to translate this word sambhajana, Pali term sambhajana, then you really don't get the deep understanding of impermanence, because sambhajana really requires, it's an embodied awareness of impermanence, awareness of non-self, awareness emptiness as well. So that's why I think it's a if for us to happen. Oh, sorry, Lindy, you have a question. Please go ahead.
I didn't have a question, Sonam.
Oh, sorry. I thought you have your hands up. Okay.
No, sorry.
So now, if you look at this word, understanding impermanence, observing body in body. Now you might wonder, why is this word body in body? What do that? In Pali word is kaya kaya anupassivihārati. Basically, within the body, you have to observe body, which means no imagination, no visualization. You're not just visualizing things from outside. You're actually literally observing your body in the framework of your body. And when you do that, you have to rely on your own experience, bodily experience. And then if we do that, then of course Sutra says, having removed craving and aversion towards the world of mind and matter, he dwells or she dwells ardent with awareness and constant thorough understanding of impermanence. So then one can actually thoroughly understand the impermanence of one's own body. But you can do that only if you actually literally are within your own body. So at the moment, if you let's say if I ask you to just observe your what's happening on your knee, if you have an acute pain, you feel it. But if you don't have anything, and if you are not meditator, or if you are not vipassana type of meditator, you may not actually feel what is happening on the body. If I ask you to see what's happening on the crown of your head, you may feel some sort of scratch, maybe some obvious sensation if there's a wind blowing, but natural normal sensation might be difficult. So therefore, the cultivation of or sensitizing that awareness becomes so crucial, because that will help us to understand what's happening. And that's basically observing body in body. Then observing sensation in sensation. What that means, having removed a craving and aversion towards world of mind and matter. In other words, removed craving and aversion towards all sensations. So, and that's why I said earlier, this is where our implicit bias becomes so obvious. Now you got to remember 3 different types of sensations: pleasant sensation, unpleasant, and neutral sensations. Pleasant sensation is something that we always gravitate, we are attracted, so we want more. Unpleasant sensation, we always don't want it, so there's a repulsion. We always want to run away from it. So let's say sometimes you have a physical condition which there's so much of itchiness, right? And when you scratch the itchy sensation, itchiness, you feel as if kind of very pleasant. But of course, at the once you scratch it, then it starts bleeding, and then it gives you enormous pain. But when you're scratching it, it's sort of joyful. That's where our implicit bias becomes so obvious, because you are biased towards what is happening on the body. Type of sensation arises, and we just don't have the ability to observe them objectively with equanimity. And that is in the end, you will notice that is the most important project of Buddhist meditation. If we cannot come out, rise above that bias towards those 3 different types of sensations, pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, neutral sensation that rises in the body, there is no way that we cannot come out from our prejudice. Because our prejudice and preference towards the pleasant sensation and repulsion towards against unpleasant sensation and apathy towards neutral sensation, it will always remain. And Buddha's teaching actually fundamentally is to rise above that deep-rooted biases and what we call implicit bias. And that becomes so obvious when we start observing sensation in sensation. And the problem is, of course, because as a result of this implicit bias, we are trapped in the samsara again and again, because pleasant sensations are so attractive. We always want it, and that's so addictive. We always want it. Unpleasant sensations are also so addictive. We always don't want them. We always run away from them. But in doing so, we always do that without understanding. And Buddha's revolutionary discovery is that when you observe those sensations, objectively understanding them, pleasant sensation, you use pleasant sensation, you just observe pleasant sensation, understand its impermanence, anatta, non-self, empty, then you come out from that implicit bias. You use again unpleasant sensation as a tool, and observe it objectively, and then understand its impermanence, arising, passing, observe again and again, you understand impermanence, you can understand non-self, you understand emptiness. That's how you gradually come out from implicit bias with respect to unpleasant sensation. So therefore, later on, when even you have unpleasant sensation, you don't hate that much. You can cope with much better. So that's why this method is important. And then again, observing mind in mind. Here is a little bit observing mind in mind. But how do you do that? Well, how do you observe your mind? Well, again, you have so many thoughts raging, sometimes unpleasant thoughts, sometimes pleasant thoughts. And unpleasant thoughts you really want to run away from, try to escape, because you suffer so much. Pleasant thought or some pleasant thought arises, you want more and more. So again, you can see this is the bias. This is the what we call defilements. The defilements, addictive habits that keeps us trapped. And how do you come out? The way to come out, again, resorting back to bodily sensation, and he says, having removed craving and aversion towards the world, and in this case, the world of mind, mind and matter, he dwells ardent with awareness and constant thorough understanding impermanence. Start with impermanence. You need to understand that those thoughts are constantly arising, passing away, just like a flickering light of a flame, right? Arising, passing away, arising, passing away, and then our addictive habit becomes, weaker, and eventually we come out. And then again, the fourth and the final establishing awareness is observing mental contents and mental contents. So thoughts of anger, hatred. Again, for anger, we really don't want. Hatred, we don't want. If there's a joy or maybe loving kindness, we want. So then there's, again, sort of a competition or craving towards something, aversion towards something else, and we don't want, we need to come out from those. So these actually concretely give us some understanding what these fourfold awareness actually involves. So that's why, referring back to Satipatthana Sutta, now you can see that actually observing one's body and witnessing it yourself becomes so, video. It becomes so important for because if you don't experience your own body, even when you are observing your thoughts, that if let's say you are very angry at this stage, and if you can feel everything that's happening here around this brain level, and just observe the brain, observe the heat, observe the cold, whatever sensation you have, and without reacting, without using reflexes, then of course that's becomes the path to resolving anger, hatred. Whereas if you keep thinking about anger and especially who made you angry, you will notice that your anger becomes more and more intense. So that's why those four what we called satipatthanas, namely awareness, establishing awareness of body, establishing awareness of bodily sensation, establishing awareness of mind, and establishing awareness of what is happening in the mind or the mental contents. Those things are the very heart of the whole sutra. And of course, this sutra gives a very profound description. And what happens, it starts with the Dhamma Anupassana. That's why, if you will notice that you were already talking about type of action. So if you are performing a mental action or physical action, one has to observe one's own mind, what of intention, what you use to perform action or to trigger or to initiate those actions. And in doing so, you will notice that one has to bring one's awareness within the framework of one's own mind. So yes, I think, unfortunately, we already ran out of time. Any quick questions? Yes, Kamla.
So, can you repeat the third type of sensation about neutral sensations?
Yeah. So you got a pleasant sensation, right?
Yeah.
Pleasant sensation, everything we know. And remember that usually for the meditators, pleasant sensation is mostly due to the physical sensation. pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, and then the third one is the neutral sensation. It's a neutral sensation, is neither pleasant nor unpleasant sensation. Now, why these are so fundamental for the practitioner? And that is the practitioner, because this is, by using those sensations, you can bring, you can experience. Buddha was asked whether he was a rationalist, empiricist, so many skeptics and so many different, and Buddha said basically he's an experientialist, namely that without experiencing things within our body, there is no way that we can understand how suffering occurs. And then if we don't know how suffering occurs, then there is no way for us to get rid or come out from that suffering. So therefore, coming back to one's body becomes very important too. But then when you look at the type of sensation that you have in the body, there are three: pleasant, unpleasant, and the neutral. Pleasant sensation that you always want. We are attracted toward pleasant sensation. Unpleasant sensation, we always have an aversion towards unpleasant sensation. And then neutral sensation, we just ignore them. That's why it becomes a cause of confusion, or what we call ignorance. Now, vipassana, what meditation does, satipatthana does, is actually the practice of meditation. You have to go back and use those four sensations, three types of sensations. You need to use those sensations, and when you bring awareness to those sensations, it does not, pleasant sensation does not create karma. Instead, you can use pleasant sensation to liberate, to free yourself from craving and lust. This is the fundamental part of the practice. In other words, you need to use pleasant sensation to come out from craving. How do you do that? Well, when you observe pleasant sensation that arises in the body, observe objectively, and you'll notice it arises, passes away, arises, passes away, and you realize impermanence. And that becomes, with the help of pleasant sensation, you develop the wisdom of impermanence, the wisdom of selflessness, and wisdom of emptiness. Then it becomes a path. That's the most important. And the second one is unpleasant sensation. Again, you have a lot of unpleasant sensation, and we usually hate them. But for meditator, absolutely, this is a very useful technique, useful tool. Because when you have unpleasant sensation, usually we develop aversion. We hate unpleasant sensations. So then it disturbs the mind. For a meditator, you use this unpleasant sensation, arising, passing away, just observe, arising, passing away, and turns out you are able to come out from anger. Your anger becomes less and less because you're able to observe unpleasant sensation without reaction. Usually, when something is unpleasant, something that is that doesn't go with your will, we just basically hate them, and because of repulsion, we create more and more karma. But when we start observing it objectively, you notice that the unpleasant sensation is always subject to change, constantly arising, passing away. Impermanence, it doesn't have a self, it doesn't have a solid identity, it is non-self, it does not exist its own, therefore it is also empty. And with this realization, with this cultivation of wisdom, you can come out from hate or anger or resentment or disappointment by using or with the help of unpleasant sensation, with the awareness of unpleasant sensation. So that's why it's another important, the second most important tool, right? Tool for liberation. And that's why the sutra that I read, Satipatthana Sutta, says this is the only way, Buddha says, for the beings to come out from the lamentation, suffering, and understand the truth. And the neutral sensation sometimes very difficult, because neutral sensation, because there is unpleasant, there is neither unpleasant, no unpleasant, neither pleasant, no unpleasant. You really don't feel sensation unless you become very sensitive. And as a result, we develop a lot of ignorance. We stay confused, and we ignore them because nothing is obvious. So that's why cultivating that sensitivity to deep sensitivity, and when you do that, even you notice that it is also changing, constantly arising, constant passing away. And when we do that, it becomes actually, it becomes direct antidote against our confusion and ignorance. So in the end, if we don't use them as a path, we are addicted towards those sensations. They becomes a trap for us in samsara. If you ask this, I mean, the short answer from meditator's perspective is, with the help of those sensations, we are trapped in samsara because we are addicted to pleasant sensation, unpleasant, and neutral sensation. Because of that addiction, we remain trapped in samsara. We just don't want to come out. So, but now, if we really want to come out of samsara, we need to use those three sensations as a path, as a vehicle, understand them, develop those wisdom, and then, of course, they becomes a path, means to come out, becomes a path for liberation. There are more things to say, and Buddha introduces two more. In fact, he used to manasa, mental sensation. So-called mental agony is different from physical agony, right? And mental joy is different from physical joy as well. So because we don't have time, so I think we may leave that discussion for a little later, for next time. We're run out of time. Lindy, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So
Thank you, Sonam.
we
Thank
didn't
you
get
so
to
much.
start with the, we didn't get to start with the non-virtuous. So we will actually next in the next sitting, if you can do a little bit more reading. So the 10 non-virtuous actions, and then start with the 10 virtuous actions. So if we get time, I think we might cover those. So this, I think, in this, give us feedback. Okay, what is your preferred way? Do you want to jump, read chapter by chapter a month, or you want to go sort of a small step? That's what I thought. Maybe going small step might be better. What's your or maybe if I ask this question quickly, any suggestions, preferred methods you want to use?
I like the small steps.
Oh, great. Okay, so please do read and also bring the question. So
Yeah.
my job this time, I also thought of asking a lot of questions again. We asked counter questions, and then even some sections we read them together and then look deeply, because there are certain, of course, issue of ethics, morality is a very contemporary and of course relevant to our day-to-day life. There are certain if you identify yourself as Buddhist, doesn't matter, of course, that's not, I think, not the most important part, but at least if you have certain principles that you hold and that aligns with the Buddhists, then you might be interested to answer, okay, understand what is Buddhist position on this, what is Buddhist position on understanding this, what are the reasons why Buddhists think this way, why Buddhists don't think that way. I mean, these are important questions for us to, so hopefully we will be able to ask a lot of questions, and whether they are tricky or problematic questions, if we don't have answer, then we might be collectively we might be able to find some resolutions anyway. So that's good. Okay, so we will agree to go by step, smaller step by step. Okay, there are certain chunks that we might need to go big leap, but anyway, I think we'll take step by step. That's the decision. Okay, thank you very much.
So Sonam, did you want to will we do the dedication, Shanti Deva's prayer?
Yes, I think we will end that.
You like that?
Yeah.
I'll share that on the screen then for all of us to join, if that's okay. Is that okay? Yeah, we'll try. Is that okay? You can see?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. So thank you very much, Sonam. We appreciate so very much you joining us. So we'd love to dedicate in that way.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. So may all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain a notion of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonam.
Thank you.
Everybody for joining.
lot.
So,
See you,
let me
everyone.
just ask you, did you want
Next
to make this session a little bit longer? Would you rather start at 10 o'clock, 10 to 12, and have a short break in the middle, or you're happy with the 1.5 hour?
What's the what other thing? Is it too short or?
10 minutes break.
So 10 minutes break in middle, Angela, you said?
I'm not sure who said that, but
I think Angela.
Ah.
Angela, you're muted.
I think Angela said it's 10 to 12 with 10 minutes break. Is that right?
okay, a little bit longer with a break. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. 10 to 12, all right. So, yeah, okay. That makes sense. Is that okay for everyone? Great,
Sure.
okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
See you
Sonam.
next time. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Sonam.
Thank you, Lindy. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Linty, as well.
Thank you.